Good morning, happy Monday, how are you? Well, today I'd like to talk about inspiration versus perspiration. Now, you must have heard of the Einstein quote that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Well, who am I to argue with that? Except I would say that the percentages are slightly wrong. And the reason that I'm going to say that is because you definitely need, I think, to have an idea, to have an inspiration in order to get something done. But if it's only 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, that sounds like a hell of a lot of hard work, doesn't it? Now, I'm not against hard work, and I think sometimes when you're inspired to do a project, it may actually be hard work. And that's fine, but when you're coming from that place of inspiration, it doesn't feel like hard work, does it? And that's what I'm going to be talking about, because when you have to work hard on something, when something starts to feel heavy, it starts to feel like a slog, you know, when you wake up in the morning, rather than thinking, yay, I'm going to work on this today, you're like, oh, I've still got that to do, that kind of feeling. That's when everything starts to look a little bit grey, doesn't it? And that's when your resilience starts to trickle away, you feel, because you just can't be bothered. And then knowing that you can't be bothered and that you kind of should be doing this thing, that makes you feel worse about yourself, and then you start to feel bad about yourself. You start to tell yourself that you should be getting on with it, and you go around in a very destructive cycle, because then, of course, who's inspired when you're telling yourself things like that? So as I say, I think working hard on a project is great, it's good fun, and you want to do it, of course you would, because that's what gives your project legs. But there really is a difference, and I'm going to talk about when I was doing my online courses. Now, when I was doing my online courses, I really was inspired to do the course. It really lit me up. But then it was hard work. I had no idea how to film it, what to do with it. It was a real time of confusion for me. And when I get confused, I get a little bit like, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. But that didn't mean to say I wasn't inspired to get on with it every day. So yes, the perspiration part, of course I glow, I don't perspire, but the glowing part for me was definitely the learning how to do things, because I had to get lights, I had to work out the camera, the editing, oh my goodness, working out how to get it onto a program that I could edit it, and then editing it took forever. But all the time I was working hard on it, and I used to put in a lot of hours too, so there was no shortage of hard work. But I was inspired, the inspiration never left me. And then after my first course, which was horrendous, I went on to do another course and then added things. So I didn't even stick to what I already knew. I wanted to learn more, and I went through the whole cycle again. And then with a third course, I added a green screen, and let me tell you, that was that was really taking me to my edge. But again, all the time that I was really working hard on these online courses, working hard on these projects, I was totally inspired. I really believed in my content. That side of it I had no problem with at all. So the inspiration that I felt carried me through the hard work, enabled me to keep going, enabled me to wake up in the morning excited about what I was going to produce that day. And I have a friend who has been doing a job share, and she's, you know, it's okay, but it was a job, and she wasn't very inspired by it. She went every day because she's dutiful, and she got on with it, and she certainly did her best, but she felt very lackluster about it. There was no inspiration there. And then she took over the job, because the job share, the lady that shared with her was leaving, and they asked my friend if she would like to take the whole job, and she said yes, that would be very nice. And then suddenly she became inspired. So when I last saw her, rather than the job, yeah, well, it's okay, now she said she's revamping all the systems, and what to someone else might sound incredibly tedious, but she was inspired to do it, and that made her days fly by. She said she's actually working longer hours and it feels like she's working less. And that's what I'm talking about. So I'm not talking about not having any perspiration in the game. I'm talking about the inspiration carrying you through, because going back to my online courses, if I'd only been 1% inspired, I would not have ended, I wouldn't have finished them, I wouldn't have completed the task, because that 1% just would not have carried me through. And this inspiration could be for anything, couldn't it? It could be, it doesn't have to be for a big project, it could be cooking a meal. And if any of you out there cook a meal, you know the difference between cooking a meal and being inspired to create something different. And that doesn't have to have any extra time with it. It doesn't have to mean, you don't have to wait till you're in a good mood to do that. You just fancy doing it. You're inspired to do something different. And that, so the same task with a different mindset, totally different. And that's what I'm talking about. So I'm talking about anything that you do. And, you know, you don't have to be constantly inspired. I'm not saying that if you start something and then it starts to become a bit of a slog, then, well, that's normal, I think, isn't it? Because most things have their times when they're a bit of a slog. I'm talking about, rather than it always being a bit of a slog, the thing that inspires you to do whatever it was in the first place is with you. It carries through. It's that kind of fire of inspiration that's always there. So it might go down a bit, but it flares up too. So I wouldn't want you, if you're inspired to do something, you start it and then it starts to feel a bit, oh, okay, I've got to do that again. Or it starts to be a bit of a slog. I wouldn't want you to imagine that inspiration has left you, or that it's time to abandon that project, because that's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm just talking about allowing inspiration to come up. So if you're inspired to do something, back to my online courses. When I was doing the courses, so I had an idea in my mind how it was going to look. And then, because the project was so dear to me, as I was going through, I would be inspired to try something new. I would be inspired to take it in a slightly different direction. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Not feeling that if you're not constantly inspired, then it's a dud. Forget it. No, that's not what I mean. I'm just talking about allowing what inspired you to carry you through. Because if we're in the middle of a project, especially if it's quite a long-term project, you know, if it's a project that's going to take you quite a few months to complete, there will be times in those months when you think, why the hell did I start this? What am I doing? And that's when it's quite nice to remember what inspired you in the beginning. That's how you can carry the inspiration through the project, isn't it? Just to remember what it was that lit you up about whatever you're doing. Yeah, because I don't know if you've ever done any house renovations too. That's the time when you can get really inspired to, I don't know, build a new room or completely change something. Bathrooms and kitchens are a nightmare, aren't they? So you might be inspired to do it, and then when you're in the middle of rubble and you're fed up with not being able to cook a meal or have a shower, then you may really feel that inspiration's left you. But then if you have a vision, when you start thinking again about how you want whatever it is to look at the end, you feel that inspiration again, don't you? So it doesn't matter that you're standing in rubble, because you know there's an end to this, you know there's an end to the project, and you're inspired to get there. So I suppose to wrap up what I'm saying today is, one, anything that doesn't inspire you at least 50%, I would ask you to question why you're doing it. There will be things that you have to do and that don't particularly inspire you, but something like a new project, if it isn't inspiring you at least 50% of the time, don't worry about being a genius, like Thomas Edison said. Just wonder, as I say, why you're doing it. Are you doing this project because you should, because it's worthy, or does it inspire you? And if it inspires you, you know, however difficult it will be, however much perspiration is in the game, you know that you'll get to the end of it. And so I'd like you to just think about what inspires you. And I hope you have a very inspiring week, and I'll see you next Monday. Okay, bye-bye.